Hello my lovely people, and welcome back to Addie's World. My name is Aodain. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. If not and this is your first time, sit down, relax, grab a drink. Stay till the end of the video. If you like what you see, maybe think about smashing that subscribe button and making sure your bell is on for your all upcoming notifications. What I do here is a bit of makeup, a bit of true crime and everything in between. And today's video is one of true crime. And researching this case, it has to be one of the most diabolical cases I've ever read into. So I'm going to stop yapping and we're going to jump on in. So guys, as per usual on my true crime, I have a cup of tea and a few toffees going around, so there could be a few pauses. Today's case is the case of Sophie Lionnet. A French 21-year-old au pair, and I'm going to apologise in advance for my pronunciation. I really tried hard. I looked up the names, I looked up the pronunciation of the names, and I even wrote phonetically down for myself, but I have a feeling that is just not going to be enough. So the case we have kind of all starts on the 20th of September 2017 in the affluent neighbourhood of Wimbledon. If you don't know where Wimbledon is, it's that posh, fancy place that they play tennis in England. Enough said, it's pretty, it's where all the celebrity goes and are spotted on the final days. But on this day, a woman was in her house and noticed, around 3 p.m, noticed this mass of smoke coming from her next door neighbours. It was a fume of smoke, it was billowing in. The houses were quite close together, so she, like any person would do, phoned the fire department thinking there could have been something wrong. Something was on fire, there could have been an accident. Little did she know what she was phoning the fire department on. They were dispatched. 8 minutes later, a deputy of the name of Thomas Hunt arrived at the house of Wasim Mandouni. I hope I got that right. And Sabrina Kuder. And Wasim himself greeted him and just told him, I'm just barbecuing. Fire department went out the back as you would, because I'm sure they had to clarify, yeah, he's just having a barbecue. Even though the amount of smoke that was coming was just a little suspect. But what they saw is a barbecue on, and for some unknown reason, the point that it's always made is that he said he was cooking chicken. That was fine. But what they also noticed was a separate fire beside it, and that was fully ablaze as well. And when asked about that, he said, oh, I'm cooking lamb. Again, why the two were highlighted in all the reports, I'll never know. But on closer inspection, Thomas Hunt said they could see the fingers of a human body. And from here, this case starts. And we are in for a wild ride because this story is horrific, it's cruel, it's abusive, and unfortunately ends in the death of, as mentioned, Sophie Lionnet. Who is Sophie Lionnet? Sophie Lionnet was born in Troyes in France, an only child to her mother Catherine and Patrick. It's taken every part of my Irishness not to go to Catherine and Patrick. But anyway, she was an only child. She had a great group of friends. One of her best friends was a man named Lien. They were very close. And at the age of 20, she had received a cert for caring for children. But unfortunately, she couldn't get any work locally. And this opportunity came up to go to England to be an au pair. And she got the job and she took it with both hands. It was a great opportunity to travel and to do something she loved. What I could find was not really much else I could find in her life. Not to say she didn't have a life, but it's been the details are kept very quiet, obviously for privacy reasons. The fact that she's from France and this happened in England, there's not a lot more details about Sophie, only that she was a kind, loyal and such a gentle person. And she went to work for Wasim and Sabrina. And on the day that this body was found burning, Wasim himself was immediately placed under arrest and brought in for questioning. And his partner Sabrina was found taking her children to a playground, and she was said to have been shocked and ignorant and didn't know what was happening. When questioned about their live-in nanny, who'd lived with them for nearly a year and a half, Sabrina had said she had left 2 days ago and they hadn't seen her since. So let's bring on Sabrina in for questioning, just in case. Again, the nanny was brought up from neighbours. They said she was noticeably missing. She was minding the kids, and all of a sudden Wasim and Sabrina were taking the kids to school. They were taking them to playgrounds, and she was obviously missed. She had been a part of their life for so long, and then neighbours noticed no nanny, and someone has been burnt on the property. So when the charcoal remains were then further examined, they were found to have a fingers, a nose, bracelet and glasses. And when neighbours, family and friends were questioned, they seemed to think that those items were very similar to what their au pair Sophie had wore and was always have seemed to be wearing. So upon autopsy of the body, it was discovered that this body that was being burnt was the body of Sophie Lionnet. And at 3 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. her parents, both Catherine and Patrice, were notified that Sophie had been murdered. And it was heartbreaking because her parents were not together. They had separated and divorced at this time, so they were both notified individually. And her mum was quoted saying, "My heart was torn and a piece of flesh had been removed, and nothing made sense at that time." I mean, their daughter, who was supposed to be living her dream job, she getting to travel, was now murdered and being burnt in the most sadistic and cruel way. And unfortunately, that's not where the story ends. It just gets worse and worse and worse of what poor Sophie had to go through. So from the autopsy, again, they clarified it was Sophie, but they could see that there was fractures on her legs, in her arm, her jaw was broken, her sternum, which is her center bone here, was fractured. Now, when you think of your sternum, which is right here in your chest, guys, that's a fair hard one to break. To fracture, to do anything, I mean, we're meant for bending left, right, up, down, sideways. So for that to be cracked and fractured, it was declared that her body was severely beaten before her death. The only thing that could have been said that was anyway positive is that she was dead before she was burnt. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, that's the silver lining, but she was dead before she was burnt. Thank fucking Christ. Okay, so we have in custody Wasim and Sabrina. Wasim was always said to be in his 40s. He was a kind, gentle, a joker of a man. But as soon as he went into interrogation, he shut down. He wanted a lawyer and he would not talk. Sabrina, on the other hand, after first claiming that, God, she was so shocked and I don't know what could have happened and this is complete news to me, then started to, me personally, after reading and looking at stuff, started to unravel just a little bit. I mean, they have friends of her, and I think one of them is Joe Alvarez, who is a well-known photographer. And although Wasim was a joker, a friendly, a kind man, Sabrina was known as kind of femme fatale. She would do anything to be a star. She wanted celebrity and notoriety. She started off as a stylist into a makeup artist and wanted to mix with the higher ups, the celebrity types of people. So she was kind of known for doing anything to be a star. And they did say she looked like Kim Kardashian. Let me see what you think. I mean, and she used to go with it. She'd be like, yeah, I'll pose for a picture. And I'm like, okay. So Sabrina started to tell this story in January 2016. She offered Sophie this job and it was a job of a lifetime. There was going to be so many opportunities. Sabrina was so well up that she was going to be doing makeup for films and she could introduce Sophie to all these celebrities. So Sophie probably didn't even have to think about it twice. She got the offer, she heard the explanation of the job and was like, yes please, what is such a way to expand my just whole life experience. So it was said after Sophie It was said after Sophie came over to work for Sabrina that she had slightly changed. She became more into makeup and how she looked, and Sabrina took her on a photo shoot and did her makeup and posed for pictures, and her friend Lillian was saying, oh, you know, I thought she was beautiful, but that wasn't Sophie. I mean, that's not who Sophie was. So people could see that she was changing, probably under the influence of Sabrina, that she wanted to be living that kind of life Sabrina was, getting makeup, getting photo shoots, doing stuff like that. So you could see why Sophie was tempted to come over, and unfortunately what she didn't know is how twisted and how sadistic and how vengeful Sabrina was, and unfortunately she was just a pawn in this whole story. So Sabrina, being in custody, then started to portray Sophie as a lazy nanny. She didn't look after the kids, she didn't want to be there, she fell in with the wrong crowd, she had stole jewellery from Sabrina, and she was drinking and doing drugs. And this is in her statement to the police. Sabrina was quoted as saying, most of the time she was on the phone, sitting on the couch. She was waiting for us to serve her, as if we were working for her and her not for us. Now, if you had someone working for you like that, wouldn't you just fire them if you were that unhappy? Just fire her. If she was really doing all these things and you were paying her money, fire her. Get her out of your house. But no. Even though she was so unhappy with the job Sophie was doing, she kept her on. I wonder why. And this, to top everything off, Sabrina then accused Sophie of having an affair with her ex, Mark Walton. Now, Mark Walton was the father of Sabrina's youngest child, and she claims that she had seen Mark and Sophie in hotels together and they were hooking up all the time. But then she also stated that Sophie was going to bring the youngest child, who Mark was the biological father of, to his house so he could rape and sexually assault his 4-year-old. And then between the 18th and 19th of September, Wasim had found out, completely had lost the plot, that she was dared to do any of this to a child, and smashed her head against the tiles, and she fell back and accidentally died. And while this was happening, Sabrina claimed she was asleep, and Wasim came into her after it happened, and they both decided that they didn't want to affect the children, they didn't want anything involved, so they were going to get rid of the body. Yeah. So let's get even further into this shit story. So not only does Sabrina say this, that Sophie was not doing her job, she was drinking, she was doing drugs, but now she also puts on her that she was almost a perverted and a malicious nanny that was going to lure this child out of the house to be sexually abused by their father. And the worst thing is, Wasim confirms everything, that it was an accident, that Sabrina was asleep, and they even had a handwritten confession that was confirmed to be Sophie's handwriting, saying and stating, quote, Mark Walton asked me to come see him. He started touching my breast and kissed me on the neck. Mark offered me some money and asked me to come back with Sabrina's youngest child. And again, this was in Sophie, it was confirmed to be in Sophie's handwriting, so kind of what Sabrina was saying, you were wondering, did this make sense? And although this was confirmed, Sophie's family were not having any of it. They were like, hello, I call bullshit. And from this, we see a much darker story start to come out, and the truth eventually starting to come out, because this was a wealthy couple in Wimbledon. This was their word that, oh God, it was an accident, all we should be charged with is really a destruction of a body. To me, Sabrina has changed her story from being completely ignorant to then saying, oh, I know exactly what happened, but I was asleep. And then we made the decision. I mean, she's changed her story so much, but she still claims that she was not involved. The only thing she knew about is that when it happened, Wasim came to her and they decided to protect the children, protect themselves, burn the body, and be done with it. So why don't we get into the real truth of what happened So New Scotland Yard are involved, and they're basically like, Sabrina, we call bullshit. We don't trust you, we don't believe a word you're saying. Handwriting note, there's a bit much more involved. Because they had talked to the neighbours, they had talked to family friends, and everyone who they came in contact with said Sophie was a role model to those kids. She loved those kids. She was constantly around those kids. She couldn't do more for the kids. And one interview with Joe Alvarez, he actually said one of the children started crying at one stage when they were out. Sophie ran over to them and comforted them straight away. So this portrayal of being lazy and being out of control and an affair with Mark Walton, like, they were like, it just really made it hard for them to believe. So they kept digging, thank Christ. So it came out from neighbours, and one of the close neighbours was the woman who phoned the actual fire department the first day. Like, Sophie was being totally exploited. She was expected to clean, to cook, to do food shoppings, to not take a day off. She couldn't use her own phone unless Sabrina was there beside her. If she wanted to make a phone call to her mother, it was said that she actually left the house. She had no privacy. She had been completely and fully exploited by this family. So much that she went there in 2017. She didn't even get to go home for Christmas. She didn't even get home. And it turns out, kind of more into it, and the more I got involved in it, I was like, well, why didn't she leave? Why couldn't she do this? This girl was physically and mentally abused. Not only that, they took her passport, all her documents. They didn't pay her, so she couldn't escape them. And another family friend by the name of Michael, he was actually a friend of the couple, and he was actually going to go into business with them. And I think about 4 or 5 months before what happened to Sophie happened to her, she came into his restaurant one day and she was so upset, and he inquired, and she said, Sabrina beat me. And he was like, why? What happened? She goes, the butter fell out of the fridge. Now, unless the butter is made of gold, and he was totally shocked, totally taken back, and he wanted to help her. He offered her money. He offered to get her to a safe place to help her out. But Sophie, being the kind, gentle, and just, oh, God love her, she didn't want to inconvenience him. And she said no. And this was the last time he ever saw her. And if you watch, there is a documentary on Amazon Prime. If you watch that, he's still quite heartbroken by it, because he's like, I could have helped her. I could have got her out. I didn't realise what was going on. So, as mentioned, Sophie's phone was taken away from her or she had to make phone calls in Sabrina's company. And Sabrina was becoming that manipulative and twisted. She took to calling Sophie's mother. And when the mother voiced concern about Sophie, Sabrina was quoted saying, she's like a sister to me. I wouldn't ever let anything happen to her. So with the severe beating on and the injuries on Sophie's body, they knew something else, something more severe than banging your head off tiles and her falling down had to have happened. And they were very suspicious of Sabrina's ever-changing story. Wasim was just confirming everything, and they were kind of hit a wall. So what they did is actually contact Sophie's ex, Mark Walton. Now, Mark Walton is quite very high up in kind of celebrity circles. I think he was the founder of Boyzone, something to do with J-Lo, everything like this. And the police were like, it's a bit suspicious. This 21-year-old is with a 43-year-old, and this 21-year-old is going to bring his child to him. And Mark Walton did absolutely phenomenal at this. First thing he did was surrender all his passports and all his phones. He claimed he had never met Sophie, he had never texted, called, met her. And one of the best things was, in times that Sabrina had said they were at hotels, they were meeting up, Mark Walton could clarify that he wasn't even in the country. So the police were like, okay, this is a bit twisted. Why was this focus on Mark Walton so bad? Why did this woman want to prove or even consider that her ex-partner would sexually abuse her child? And it then comes back to Mark and Sabrina, who had met a few years before and had a child together. It was love at first sight. They met in a bank, their eyes met, blah blah blah. But 2 years into the relationship, Mark ended the relationship, and was claimed to have said that Sabrina was emotionally disturbed, she was hysterical, she was paranoid, everything like this, and it was a living nightmare. So the relationship ended, and eventually Mark stopped giving Sabrina money. And this is unfortunately where the beautiful, innocent, kind-hearted Sophie was put as a pawn to enact revenge on Mark Walton. It was Sabrina's manipulation of Wasim as well, by telling him all this terrible things about Mark, and then unfortunately using Sophie. They could clearly see that this was Sabrina's attempt at revenge on Mark Walton. And what they discovered was actually, the most damning evidence they discovered was actually on their own mobile phones. They tortured Sophie. They starved her. They demeaned her. They tortured her. They drowned her. They pulled her up. They spent hour-long interrogations of just shouting at her to tell the truth about Mark. And I'm not going to put the clips in here, but I have seen some of the clips, and you can see Sophie is just dead behind the eyes. There is one last picture that I will put up here on their phone, and it was the last picture that was ever taken of Sophie, and she is completely emaciated. She is alive, but she is dead behind the eyes. She is just staring into space, and she, like, there's parts in the interrogation that she actually starts to believe them. She is so broken at this stage. She's like, I can't remember. Like, she believes their lies because they have put so much torture and stress on this poor woman that she actually believes them. She doesn't know what she's saying. And from me, that's obviously where they got the confession, the handwritten confession about Mark Walton, because God love her, God knows what they were doing to get that, and if she didn't do it, what they would have done to her. So it was all coming to light, basically, how Sabrina was twisted as fuck, and how she played both Sophie and Wasim to a certain extent, because he was the one who did enact it, but he believed everything she was saying. Now, I'm not saying he's not culpable. He is 100%. Even if he did believe them, you can't put another person, hold them hostage, take their passport. Never paid her for anything, even though she'd been there for a year and a half. Never paid her once. Like, it's so twisted, and it's so messed up of what that poor girl had to go through. Now, I say girl, she was 21, she was a woman, but if you can see this picture, and I will try and insert it here, she looks like a lost little girl, and this was days before her murder. And again, through their own mobile phones, like, how fucking stupid are they? This is where the police gets all this from. Like, their torture, what they do, what they say, how they coerce her, and just, yeah, it's just so twisted. And eventually comes to light that basically Sabrina, the mastermind, the twisted evil bitch who couldn't let her relationship go, enacted this whole plan to get revenge on her ex. So this eventually went to trial, and of course Wasim then backed out, and Sabrina, they both played the game of he did it, she did it. But unbeknownst to them, the final nail in their goddamn coffin would be Sabrina's 9-year-old son, who testified against them. He testified that on the night of the 19th or 18th of September, because their body was found on the 20th, but they could never depict a time of where she passed away, he heard noises in the bathroom. He could hear Sabrina and Wasim screaming, and he could hear the cries of Sophie coming from the bathroom. He could hear plunging noises, and at one stage he was standing outside the door, and underneath the door came a gushing of water. So not only was he witness to the crime without seeing it, he placed both his mother and her partner. So neither of them can claim the other one did it. He put them both at the scene of the crime and being present at the time. And the next day, when he asked where Sophie was, he was told that she's gone away and you won't see her again. And the twisted thing he said when asked about his mother after that, she seemed more relaxed, more joyous, and brighter in herself. I don't know whether she thought they had got away with it, or did she think they had enough evidence against Mark Walton to what she was planning to do with it. I don't know, because she had custody of the child. Did she want to blackmail him for money, or I don't know. I do not know, but it's fucking twisted. And from that confession of her 9-year-old own son, they were both convicted for 30 years to life, plus 5.5 years for destruction of a body. Now, after reading this story and researching this story, the last picture that Sophie's mother, Catherine, has of her is the one where she is dead between the eyes, completely emaciated and lifeless. And it was said she hadn't been seen for 6 weeks before her body was found. So she had endured being locked in the house, kept prisoner, starved, tortured, manipulated, psychologically fucked with for 6 weeks. And again, one of my big questions, and I didn't find out till later, is why didn't she just leave, you know? She was a 21-year-old girl in a foreign country working for 2 grown-ass motherfucking adults. She had no passport. She had no money. Her phone was being kept away from her. She was physically, mentally, psychologically abused. And again, from that picture, that girl is broken. I'd say leaving didn't even cross her goddamn mind, because she didn't have the energy. What this couple did to this girl, and again, they were only convicted in 2018, so this is only in the last few years. What they did to her and what they could do to her was astounding. For them to be convicted from her own child's testimony, to me, is absolutely couldn't have happened to a nicer bitch. And just how psychologically twisted she was, that you think this is all about Sophie and you think like her murder, and it is, because this case is about the horrific case of Sophie Lionnet. But how twisted that woman was, that a relation ended years ago, and she held on to this anger and twisting and manipulation and enacted it all out on this poor 21-year-old girl. So this case was so hard to do, because some of the details, you can look it up online and stuff, but the injuries to her body alone, like the sternum thing, just gets me, guys, because as I say, that is a fairly, like here, right here, this bone here, to break that. And actually, I will put this little bit in, I didn't think I was going to. The reason her sternum was broken is when she died that night, they shoved her body into a suitcase. So obviously that's where the cracked sternum came from, and put it under the child's bed for 2 days for a day until they decided to burn her. I mean, God, there's so much evil in this world, and to think of the suffering someone who just was living life, who just wanted to do what they loved, and for her to come to that end. It's so hard to to see through the twistedness of Sabrina Couder and Wasim Madani. Oh, I don't know at this stage, his name I don't want to even remember his name, but like to see what happened to her. And it's, again, you want to focus on Sophie, but Sophie was unfortunately just a pawn in this twisted bitch's mind. And I just think 30 to life is not enough. Certain people deserve certain things, and for to treat another human being like that, and it's just so heartbreaking. And to watch that program on Amazon Prime of her mother and her father, they went to the trial, they stayed with the trial, they went to every day of the trial, and just for them to hear what happened to her and see these photos and how these injuries happened to her. Oh, guys, I don't know. But that to me is the horrendous case of Sophie Lionnet, a 21-year-old French au pair who survived what she could and unfortunately met the hands of two twisted, sick, psychologically damaged people. That's not any way to be remembered. And just, guys, just let me know what you think down below if you've heard of the case. If not, just, oh, it's heartbreaking. It is fucking heartbreaking what love, sex, money, and not being able to let go of these things can affect another person who wasn't even anyway involved. Okay guys, that is it for today. This case was a hard one. It was interesting, but it was, God, so hard. And just let me know what you think down below. Again, I'll put the email if anybody wants to send me an email about any crimes they know about and they've never been able to forget about or anything like that. Pop me an email to me, DM me, I don't really care, whatever way you can. But I want to thank you guys for staying with me today. It was a tough one, definitely. And if you've stayed, thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Be calm, be cool, and wear your goddamn masks. I love you, and goodbye.